Expedition 33 was the 2025 Game of the Year, and nobody should be surprised, aside from the dumbasses who unironically believe they used AI for any significant purpose in making the game, and Silksong fans. Anyways, I voted for Donkey Kong Bonanza as Game of the Year. People have already started to switch up on Expedition 2, which is crazy because most people who are hating on it definitely haven't played it. Needless to say, the game is amazing and was by far and away the most deserving for Game of the Year, containing the most complete and thought-provoking story and characters with decent gameplay and a nice soundtrack. Me and my friend were actually hating on it before we played it, like the true NPCs we are, and then we played it and we both ended up loving it. I wouldn't go so far as to call Expedition 33 a masterpiece, but it's definitely approaching that status, and I'm positive that if this game was released 15 or 20 years earlier, people would consider it a must-play classic on the level of Final Fantasy VII. A lot of the aspects of this game are absolutely top tier, but like I said, this game is no masterpiece, so I'm going to start off with the parts of the game that didn't really do it for me. And obviously spoiler warning if for some reason you haven't played the game already. Overall, the combat is good, but Expedition 33 really embodies the Souls games it takes inspiration from, which unfortunately includes the horrible telegraphing and bullshit hitboxes. I seriously cannot tell you how many times an enemy would do 14 trillion stupid fucking spins and twirls like they were performing a ballet routine. And speaking of ballet, the actual ballerinas in this game don't do the spinning. They just have a horribly telegraphed attack where it appears that they attack you to the right of the party and then they slide left, but they do the exact motion of attacking your rightmost party member, and it feels like a dishonest way to throw the player off guard. And you don't have time to reset your parry if you bite at the beginning of the attack, but for other attacks, I was able to miss the parry 3 times and still have enough time to actually get the parry off within time because the attack was so long and drawn out. It's like every single enemy and boss is just Margit from Elden Ring, and I mean that in a negative way. I get it's a decently difficult game, and if someone comments get good, you're getting blocked. I made an entire video making fun of you. But having attacks that are varying in speeds in a string is a much more effective way of having fair but difficult battles, as opposed to artificial difficulty, which relies on player instinct. The battle with Renoir and Old Lumiere and inside the Monolith are the biggest offenders of this, along with the Axon and Serene. Renoir does so many unnecessary spins, and the worst part is that it didn't even fucking work on me. If you're gonna include some bullshit, let it at least make me angry because you did all that shit just to get quintuple parried. Overall, it just feels very inconsistent and artificial to me. You get no reward from making me bite on the feint, besides making me a little more frustrated. And before someone says, oh, that's just how you make a difficult game, with feints and tricking the player, let me just say, I disagree. Monster Hunter World is one of my favorite games and is decently difficult, and it doesn't use any of these tactics. Usually it's the opposite. The attack that most often catches me off guard is the tail swipe because it's fast and has a wide area of effect. But simultaneously, if you position yourself correctly, you can nullify the downsides. In Expedition 33, you can do no such thing because you're already using that parry system, which is your lifeline. Which, this is where I reveal that I'm not really a fan of turn-based games. I love Persona and some Pokemon games, but that's really it. To me, turn-based games represent a lack of freedom, and I just prefer to move around by myself. To me, the best combat systems are ones where it's a direct confrontation between you and the enemy. You can make a move at the same time and it seems like it would be a draw, but in reality it comes down to everything from where you're standing, what weapon you're using, and what attack you chose. But alas, Expedition 33 is turn-based. I knew that when I bought the game and I still thoroughly enjoyed it, so I'm not going to hold it being turn-based as a drawback, plus it has numerous redeeming qualities to the combat system. Another thing I really don't like about this game is that I think the level design is quite terrible. It's super linear, and most of the time it just follows the same patterns as the rest of the game, so all of it kind of just ends up feeling the same. Quite another big negative I have about the game is with the side content not including Klee and Simon. I did only one of the side areas in Expedition 33 before deciding that I wasn't going to do any more of them. And don't try to lecture me on not experiencing the full game because I skipped side content. If I enjoy the game, I'll do the side content, not the other way around. The one piece of side content I did was the Yellow Harvest, and the level design was just awful, and it left a bitter taste in my mouth, not urging me to do any of the rest of it. The entire area is literally just a big-ass circle connected to another big-ass circle by a pathway, and there's another pathway connected to another big-ass circle area. And a lot of the game is guilty of this design. Now granted, there are obviously exceptions to this, and the beautiful art direction is able to make up for some of this since you can get entranced in its beauty. But it does get a bit noticeable, especially in the flying waters and earlier parts in Act 1. And finally, the last bad thing I want to talk about before moving on to the vast amounts of great ideas and executions in this game is Loon and CL. CL is honestly a bit of a nothing character with only one scene that even seems like it's trying to be a character-defining moment, but it really doesn't define her character since she doesn't do anything in the game. From when you get her in Gestural Village to the end of the game, she really doesn't provide much besides the single scene I just mentioned in Serene, which I guess is showing who she's fighting for and her grief, which was losing her husband and baby. But that's it. That's all she gets for the entire game. And yeah, I know I could play through the entire game again while only looking at her, and I could probably come up with more, but that is stupid. And Loon, the bitch, is just actively fucking annoying. 90% of the time it felt like she didn't even give a fuck about Gustav or anything but the expedition. That's not compelling writing, by the way. But guess what? She sure loves the monsters though. She just fucking loves Nevrons, never wants to stop learning about them. Gustav? Fuck him. I wish I had more time to learn about the monsters that want to kill us. What's that, Mael? Your brother just died. Fuck, we gotta finish the mission. Now I'm gonna get annoyed when you want to place a memorial for him. She acts like a weird monster fucker, and just like CL, she barely gets any depth and complexity, which is just crazy to me, because it's such a small cast. There's really only 8 characters they need to characterize, and I'm not asking for full in-depth arcs for each and every one of them. Like, I give Minoko a pass because he joined in decently late and still has an emotional moment. His son died and I felt for him more than I did for either Loon and CL in the entire game, and I've been with them for much longer. They've shown that they're able to write great characters. Renoir is one of the best characters to have come out of a video game in probably the past decade. And Mael has a very compelling character journey, but obviously they're going to have the best writing since they're the main antagonist and protagonist in the game respectively. Renoir far outshines the Painterest for the most part in terms of antagonist, by the way. But to only have singular moments over the course of a 40 to 50 hour long game, including side content, is just sort of pitiful. Xenoblade Chronicles had 7 party members, and they all get characterization throughout the main story, and 4 or 5 arguably have full-fledged character arcs, not even including the antagonists like Egil and Zanza. And on top of that, there's even more side content than Expedition 33 with the heart-to-hearts, which add way more than the campfire talks in Expedition. And it doesn't really feel right to compare it to my favorite game of all time, but even in other games that I like, including Persona, God of War, Metal Gear, and Red Dead, have much stronger supporting casts that go through meaningful arcs. Take Akechi, Freya, Hal, and John respectively. Overall though, that's a pretty short list of complaints, just side characters and some aspects of the gameplay. These didn't break my experience at all, but they did kinda bother me. Alright, I talked about some of the bad stuff in combat previously, but now it's time for me to praise it. I already explained how I'm not much of a turn-based game guy, but having a parry in a turn-based game while the enemy is attacking seems like a no-brainer in retrospect. I fucking love that thing. It's so much more rewarding to perfect parry or dodge something when in other games you either have to pray for you to evade it by luck or just hope it doesn't do enough damage to kill you. I get that's where most of the strategy comes into play, but let's be honest, brute forcing something is more fun than strategizing. And it's so much better than having to give up your turn to guard like in Persona, even though I actually think a guard in this game would be helpful. I can't tell you the amount of times when I had to just skip one of my party members' turns because I was trying to cycle back to Mael without breaking the mark on an enemy. The AP being replenished after you successfully parry or dodge something also helps the combat feel very fluent and smooth. It's an instant reward for making skillful reactions, and sometimes you can go from 0 to 9 in a single enemy turn, especially with the Pictos where you get 2 AP per parry. So overall, besides the issues with telegraphing, the combat is smooth, fluent, rewarding, strategic, and fun, and it gets my stamp of approval. I honestly have a bit of a mixed opinion on the soundtrack because when it hits hard, specifically, but honestly, that's the only song I really listen to outside of the game. It's not to say that the other songs are bad. Most of the time I feel they fit the atmosphere, but they also reuse that one fucking song so much that I definitely took notice of it, and it definitely started to bother me at one point. So it's not like I think the soundtrack is bad, I just think it lacks a bit of variety and is kind of overrated. The story to me feels like it was ripped straight out of Game of Thrones in the best way possible. It's so conceptual and unique and philosophical, and it doesn't suffer from any overused tropes or cliches. The story is a bit confusing though, so it might require a little research or an additional playthrough. Let me start off by saying Renoir is by far my favorite character, even though I know that it isn't the real Renoir for 99% of the game and he's just an extension of Eileen, but we can gather so much character and writing just from the few scenes of real Renoir we have. He's the most tragic character in a series that was practically written like a Greek tragedy. Not only did he also have to experience his son dying and his daughter being crippled just like Eileen did, but Renoir has to make the grueling decision to destroy the last of what remains of said dead son that the rest of his family is using as an unhealthy coping mechanism. And it just goes to show his iron will it took in rationalizing that. There's a saying that goes along the lines of there's no word for a parent losing a child because it's one of the worst things any person can experience. And Renoir had to struggle with the grief of losing Verso, then rationalize the idea to destroy his painting, the last remnants the family has of him. I also like it when antagonists are related in some way to the protagonist, and being a father is always a good choice because it's a bond that doesn't really need to be expanded upon in much detail. Andy Serkis does a phenomenal job voice acting. It's honestly hard to believe this is the same dumbass who's making the new Animal Farm movie, and he has some of the best lines and quotes out of everyone in the whole entire game. He's also justified in everything he does, by the way. Maëlle, or Alicia, is the other standout character from Expedition 33. She ends up being the main protagonist of the game, rest in peace Gustav. She starts off as just another nice sister character until she gets increasingly more important scenes, leading to the death of Gustav, where she takes up the mantle of protagonist with Verso, who I'll just talk about bits and pieces of throughout. For all of Act 1, and I think most of Act 2, she shares a strange connection with Renoir and the masked girl Alicia, who we don't know is her yet. And it creates a sense of suspense until we find out her true relationship, which is father, daughter, and herself. The remainder of her story is the self-actualization of her newfound knowledge and personality, which manifests itself in a complete 180 of her original goals. Now that she knows the life she lives outside of the canvas, she'll do anything in her power to prevent that reality and instead live inside of the canvas with different circumstances, her brother still being alive, and actual friends. This idea opens the door to concepts that I learned in my 12th grade philosophy class. The Experience Machine is a thought experiment by Robert Nozick that is used as a counter-argument to hedonism. It's a hypothetical experiment that asks if you would plug into a machine that could simulate any pleasurable and desirable experiences, and while inside, you would believe everything was real even though it was all programmed. Nozick argues that many people would refuse, suggesting that we value more than just pleasure. We also care about actually doing things instead of just experiencing them, being certain kinds of people, and living in contact with reality rather than illusion. The canvas is a more complex version of the Experience Machine because in the original argument, quote, someone floating in a tank is an indeterminate blob. Is he courageous, kind, intelligent, witty, loving? It's not merely that it's difficult to tell. There's no way he is. Plugging into the machine is a form of suicide, end quote. In Expedition 33, the canvas is not a form of suicide, it's a new way of experiencing life. Until the reveal of the canvas being a created world, I don't believe we're given any reason to believe that the world could just be fabricated, meaning all the characters are essentially just as real as the Desandre family outside of the canvas. They were born in the same way, speak the same, and the only thing differentiating them is the reality they live in. If you were to counter this by saying, oh, the painting isn't real, then you would be committing a no true Scotsman fallacy. There's an argument for the canvas continuing to be the morally correct choice, and there's also an argument to stop the canvas and return Maëlle to reality. They leave it for you, the one listening. No, I'm just kidding. They leave it to the player to decide which standpoint they agree with. An ending is the most important part of everything, especially art. A choice between two different endings I feel is always good, and since both have their merits, it really does just come down to a difference in personal philosophy, as opposed to other games where there's often a more correct choice beforehand. Although I don't really like how Maëlle's ending is framed as a bad one, but I can look past that as making sense in context. I really like how despite being a painted version, the only one to ask Verso what he really wants is himself. Both of the endings have a heartfelt or heartbreaking moment. By the way, the Maëlle jump scare in her ending scared the shit out of me. They both have a payoff and make sense in their own ways, and they tie the story together in a cathartic and satisfying way no matter which philosophy you decide to align yourself with. The ending is a bit similar to Persona 5 Royal, but the motivations are vastly different. Personally, I chose Verso's ending because I played Persona 5 and I know the importance of accepting reality, and I've read Pandora Hearts. I just personally think Maelle is using the canvas as an unhealthy coping mechanism, just like her mother, and she's being inherently hypocritical by tearing apart the real family she has in order to hold on to a different one. Still sucks about her lack of voice, however, you just need to thug that out. I thought Expedition 33 was a great game, lacking in some areas that I do think bring it down a bit, however. Overall, it was a pleasurable experience. See what I did there? Me and my friend both enjoyed it, which is the most important part at the end of the day. But nonetheless, it does have undeniably good writing. I hate the people who call it a spiritually Israeli game, because the chances are they're a dumbass who hadn't even played it and they're just mad that people were glazing it. I give Claire Obscure Expedition 33 an 8.5 out of 10. If you haven't played it, you should.